of the Spendflo series, Journey to CFO. I'm Ranjani. I'm the head of content at Spendflo. Spendflo is an all-in-one SaaS buying and management solution. We help high-growth startups save up to 30% on their SaaS tool stack. Today's conversation is part of Spendflo's Journey to CFO series, where we curate knowledge and insights from some of the best minds in finance. You can watch all our previous events on our YouTube channel, but today we have with us Chirag Mavani, the Chief Financial Officer at the Sold Store, which is one of India's largest D2C online brands in the casual wear segment. Welcome, Chirag. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thank you. Thank you so much for getting me on here, Ranjani. I'm currently heading the finance function here at the Soul Store. To give you a background about myself, I have done chartered accountancy and also have pursued company secretary. And been working with the Soul Store for now almost 4 years. I've seen kind of all turbulences that a CFO would have experienced because the day when I joined in Soul Store and few months later on, we experienced the pandemic, which was, I think, completely unprecedented event that we had all witnessed in our lives. So yeah, it's been a great journey in the Soul Store for me. Yeah.
Excellent. Speaking of turbulences, how do you feel about the economy today? Are you optimistic? Are you cautious, or are you just doomsday prepping?
So current state, if you look at the current state of the economy, there is no denial that there is a slowdown when it comes to the global economy, especially after the pandemic. While the world has now has started, it has learned to live with the pandemic. What has happened is that there has been an emergence of new geopolitical situation, which has led to the reorientation of global supply chain, and then that is coupled with the tightening of the monetary policy because of the rising inflations. So all of this has really weighed quite heavily on the outlook of the global economy. However, India has emerged stronger in comparison to the initial estimates. India's growth is growing steadily, and it's having a good momentum. If you also look at the exports, India is performing very well. So despite the global slowdown, our exports have continued to kind of show good levels. This is because of the sliding Indian rupee as well. That's an unfortunate thing. The brighter aspect is that the export levels are intact. And thanks to the finance ministry, our banking sector has kind of emerged strongest in the last few decades now. And this is at a time, especially when US and other advanced nations are experiencing banking crisis. We've just seen a fallout of SVB last month. So overall level, I feel I'm pretty confident about the Indian economy. I feel it will go up northwards, and we'll have to be cautious about the overall slowdown that's there in the at the global level and the geopolitical situation. But I feel that has bottomed out. We still have to be a little bit cautious over there. No.
What does it mean for your job as a CFO? How does it affect the way you do business? What kind of expenses do you cut back, or do you cut back at all? What kind of investments do you make? Can you tell us a little bit about what it means for a CFO?
So, CFO, as a finance leader, it's very important to balance your growth and profitability. It's more than cutting on your expenses, and because you have your budgets in place. So if you're sticking to your plans, and if you're having your plans, if you're sticking to your simple plans, I think that should be it. But balancing between growth and profitability is a key aspect which a CFO has to. It's a key attribute which CFO has to bring it on the table. So depending on the external environment, you'll have to balance between growth and profitability. You'll have to give continuous guidance to the management to kind of ensure that you are driving growth and profitability and balancing this out very well.
From your experience at the Soul Store, can you give us some examples of how you're doing it currently, or how one should be doing it in the future?
I just mentioned to you that I joined in Soul Store, and then pandemic struck in. So my journey at Soul Store has been like nothing less than exhilarating, because when pandemic struck in, things changed all of a sudden. And a lot of learnings actually happened, not only for me. I think it happened for all the leaders across the globe in the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So it was a period of uncertainties. The challenges emerged were unprecedented, right? So in my opinion, pandemic and the funding winter, which followed consequently, has taught us one very important thing, and that is that that earlier, before pre-COVID, there were several things which all of us kind of believed that this would never be possible or this would never happen from a practical perspective, but it happened. And hence, one of the most important aspect of building in reserves, and that to a strong one, for even for startups, as something which is kind of a big lesson that we have all learned in the pandemic. If I have to kind of sum up this in a form of an epilogue for me, it is like when you're building an organization, it is important to build something which is economically very strong, culturally vibrant, and ethically prudent. This will help you encounter all kind of dreadful threats, be it pandemic, be it funding winter, or even a terrible recession, right? So that's the key takeaway which I kind of figured in this last 3 to 4 years.
Very nice. I've been thinking the pandemic needed a different kind of leadership, right? And now we've gotten used to the pandemic, but we're facing new challenges in the economy that requires a certain kind of leadership. So can you talk about how your background has helped you in being the financial leader that got the brand through these turbulences, but also for the audiences, a little bit about what a typical journey might look like and what kind of journey do they have to make to become a CFO?
So there's one thing about inculcating extensive financial knowledge which is imbibed in a person while pursuing higher studies in the form of chartered accountancy course or a CFA course or even MBA finance course. But what is more important, it is to build a good roadmap to the career. And for that, that comes in only when you kind of start experiencing or start gathering experiences or through the corporate journey that you have to go through step by step. There is absolutely no harm if you take a bit more time than usual and kind of get stuck on a particular layer for maybe a year or two more. But it's important to kind of relish and cherish the journey. Do not think too much about the excellence and the target to reach the helm. I'm not saying do not focus on that. Do have a focus, but do not over exaggerate on that. Do not over kind of emphasize on that. Enjoy the journey. It's okay if there's a delay of year or two, but kind of please ensure that you're going step by step and getting experience on each and every single layers. That's when you kind of become a true leader when you reach the helm. And many a times I've seen small companies or mid-sized companies, their founders, their CEOs commit a mistake of hiring a professional who actually comes from a very big reputed Big Four or audit firms, but they have not witnessed this corporate journey. And when they don't do this, there are chances that they may fail to view the big picture perspective, which perhaps the founders or the management is kind of expecting them to decipher. So that's something which I feel is very important to have your kind of roadmap laid down in a step by step approach. Coming back to your first question, a leader today is expected. I mean, today, if you look at the finance and account as a function or even any other function, today the whole world is going towards automation. And as the organization grows, it becomes extremely important to automate your processes, especially the finance and accounts processes. Not only finance and account, as a finance leader, it's important that you also look upon company level processes which are kind of dwelling around the peripheries of the finance and accounts. So in order to facilitate this, a CFO or a finance leader needs to kind of spearhead the automation process like a champion. So that's one thing which I think is a very critical requirement or for a finance leader to have it as on date in the modern world. Second, to deal with situations like the pandemic and all, it's important that finance leader is when he wears a finance hat, he is able to kind of partner along with the CEOs and the founders or the co-founders, and is able to give a continuous guidance on the overall external outlook or the overall economy, and kind of caution them on what's coming ahead in the near to long term future. That helps them kind of and also if possible with the data, if they can kind of also figure out the extent of the risk that is kind of there, and that helps them kind of take corrective actions and take some remedial measures there. So that's one of the key thing I think to tackle those situations like the pandemic that we've just witnessed. So yeah, that's what this is how I would sum it up.
Excellent. it's interesting you say this because in one of our earlier webinars, one of our speakers said the CFO of the future is not just managing people, but he or she is also managing bots. And getting bots and people to work together is kind of an important skill for them, right? And I love that you say that. Can we talk a little bit more about how you're using technology and your tech stack and a financial professional's tech stack in their success?
Today, like I just mentioned in this earlier question, that if any kind of risk is to be mitigated, it is important to understand the extent of the risk. And that can be ascertained only with accurate data. In fact, in modern times, the decision making is, it's so quick. You need to you have hardly any time to come out with a solution or come out with a data. So it's very important that basically the running data is very imperative, and there is a very severe need to automate your functions and processes so that you are able to provide and retrieve the data for timely decision making. So you're, in fact, I feel where this is the area where I think Spendflo plays a very vital role. In this new age world, there are multiple solutions available which caters to specific domains now, or segments like the payable solutions or receivable trackers or reconciliations for GST vendors, etc. In fact, last week I was in Bangalore and I was attending a CFO summit, and I was simply so astonished to figure out niche offerings available in the form of solutions across different small segments of finance and accounts as a function. So it's very important to identify the right tool and then start deploying those things when the company is growing from a small scale to the mid-sized scale.
All right. Thank you for talking about Spendflo. So let's take a small detour and let's talk about how are CFOs being hired today? What are CFOs or executive recruiters looking for while they hire a CFO?
Yeah, again, I know I had an opportunity to engage with several D2C founders in one of the events in the last month. And when I was discussing with them, I realized that the biggest thing that they want to address is that they've realized that the startups, when they start with they're built with things and processes which are scattered across all the way. So one of the major asks which all founders have is that finance leader should have an ability to set up things out of this unorganized data that they have or the processes, and they should be able to streamline this and then present to them something which is very meaningful and which will help them with the decision making. So setting up things from basically the journey from this unorganized thing to organized processes is what they expect. Second thing, what they primarily look out for is the because the things are a little uncertain in startup world, and one of the most important prowess which finance leader should bring along in a startup or a small size company is that of agility and immediate adaptability to the ever changing outlook of the company.
Okay, so we have organizational skills, the ability to bring method to the madness, and we have agility. What else differentiates a good CFO from a great one?
I think so. These are, as I mentioned, agility and the ability to transform the unorganized means of processes to organized is one key attributes which they should bring along. Beyond this, I feel they should be the clarity in communication plays a very vital role. So I don't mean to be authoritative, but be very clear in communications. See, if I have to talk about the leadership trait of a finance leader, it should be business transformational and a leader with ample clarity in thoughts. They are expected to put opinions across several matters for the organization, but they should be able to put this up in a very simplified form with a clear view so that the management and leadership team can take quick decisions basis their feedback.
Now, for those of us who aren't clear in communication and we want help, how do we find a mentor and what's the best way to use a mentor?
See, for a finance leader, I'll break this in two situations. When you are aspiring, when you're building your academic skill sets, that is when you look up to your friends and families and idealize someone who has kind of reached a pinnacle to figure out the path for you to gather the competent qualifications so that you can aspire to be there. But once you've kind of started with an employment, it's important to identify high performing resources and observe their key attributes, which is kind of demarcating them from the others. Uh, and I'm saying resources so that, learning here is incessant because you are then open to learn from someone who is performing extraordinarily at the execution level as well, and not only at the strategic or leadership level. So this is my advice, even to my team members, that look out for people who are kind of excelling in their particular field. Need not be the leaders, need not be always be someone who's at the management level, but someone who's kind of doing his or her job remarkably well.
Okay. What are the few mistakes they should avoid in that journey to becoming a CFO?
Honestly, I've in the last 4 years or 5 years, I've kind of
also tell us some of the big mistakes that you've made and give us a laugh.
in the last 5 years, what I've realized is that pandemic has taught us like when there was as lessons that something which was not anticipated or thought about, like we had an attitude of aisa thodi hota hai. But that attitude before again that attitude sets in, I want to kind of ensure that we kind of have kind of created a wall and kind of have created robust taken robust measures to kind of ensure that if there is anything which is unprecedented, still there are kind of ways to mitigate that. So that's something which I think which was not in place earlier, but now I think we kind of learned this hard way, and we are right now ready for those kind of things as well now.
Okay, but you still haven't told me about the biggest mistake you made.
Which I'll not say. Because I haven't made.
Okay, excellent. All right. So what does the future look like for you, for the economy, for D2C, for technology startups? What is your prediction for what might happen?
I feel, digital transformation has already kind of commenced and is kind of heading quickly for most companies. I remember when I started my career, I was carrying along invoices, physical invoices for approval and authorization, being in the finance domain. But today, my team in the Soul Store, there has never been that kind of a process, right? So everything is digitized. So what I'm trying to say is that we have all kind of initiated this transformation in our own way. Some probably would have scaled up the digital transformation at a very large level. Some of them at a slightly lower level, but that's the only way forward for now. That's what it appears. A good thing for CFO or a finance leader is that his role is very sacrosanct. So the essence of the role doesn't change. It is just the processes and the representation aspect which undergoes a change. So it's like the hardware changes, but the software remains the same.
You're saying we are going through a journey of transformation. In that process, a lot of things are changing in the short term, but over the long term, they change much slower, right? As a CFO, how do you balance short-term turbulence or even short-term changes, goals, and your long-term vision for where you want to take your organization?
I always feel that whatever you do in the short term should kind of collaborate or complement the overall long-term objectives of the organization. So, in fact, in our company, the Soul Store, we have a concept of formulating a religious statement across each functions. And the larger aspect of this exercise is to kind of ensure that all of the statements should eventually culminate and address the long-term objectives of the organization. So that this simplifies everyone's life because you're working towards a task which is kind of going to complement the long-term objectives of the organization. So you're not going to lose your path somewhere.
Okay, excellent. So that brings us to our last question. Do you have any specific advice or anything specific that you want to leave our audiences with before we start taking audience questions?
CFO stands for Chief Financial Officer certainly, but CFO's role, we can also call it as a Chief Future Officer because it's very important that he brings in on the table the future readiness attribute. Especially when you look at the current modern world where the transformation, especially digital transformation that's happening, he has to be like future ready to transform digitally. He should be agile enough and foresee the risks that are coming in the near to long term future, so that accordingly he can suggest a mitigative remedy by assessing the extent of the risk. So I always look up to CFOs as the chief future officer and not just handling the current situation.
Okay, excellent. We seem to have a lot of interest in the automation bit. So let's take the first one. Anshul Trivedi says automation can perform tasks which are denied in workflow, but how will it be helpful when adjustments are required to get the accurate numbers?
Again, I'm not sure about which adjustments are being referred here, but I feel that once see it's not about just automating a particular thing, it's about automating and kind of refining the processes as well. So once you do that, I think there should be minimal adjustments. That's the objective of automating a thing. Otherwise, if there are going to be manual adjustments or which are required, then it defeats the purpose of automation. So I'm not sure about what exact adjustments that are being referred to, but if it's about manual adjustments, then the larger picture here is that we'll have to kind of look out for solutions and projects where you are automating things holistically and not kind of missing out on the overall main objective of kind of leaving out few things for manual adjustments.
Yeah, like they say, if you're automating a bad process, you just have an automated bad process. So
Right.
it's an opportunity to fix processes first and then automate them for better work, making them work better. Now, I have another question on the automation itself. It says, while there are multiple tech solutions available to automate, how do you see integration efforts that go into this? Have seen companies end up taking multiple tools in their journey from small to big and then struggle since too many tools and no single source of truth. So the core question is, should the solutions be bought from large players who bring best but at high cost, or new tech players who bring value at least cost?
I think it's a very, very pertinent question, I think, and it's a question which I think even we encounter in our company here. So my view here is that when the company is growing through a phase, that's when the company is in this mid-size or small to mid-size category, it's important that you kind of figure out solutions which are offered, like I just mentioned in the earlier questions as well, that there are like so many niche offerings right now in the market, right? So you can try and fix up a payable solutions through them and reconciliation solution from someone else, GST solution from someone else, because that's cost effective for you as compared to implementing a full-fledged ERP right now and kind of then struggling to even deploy that and implement that correctly, because ERP is a requirement. I feel it's a very big process change in itself. So it's good to kind of first start with the automation of small functions like the payables and receivables, and then once your company has crossed a certain threshold, you can probably look at kind of investing into a larger projects like ERP implementation.
And Karthik, if you have too many tools, you should check out Spendflo. We'll help you organize that and save money. All right, the next question from Anshul. How do you draw a line between CEO and CFO when it comes to growth and profitability? Excellent question. Do you draw a line? What is the line between the both of you or in the middle of both of you? What's it like?
So, like I mentioned earlier as well, it's important for a CFO to kind of balance this growth and profitability. So it's important to kind of understand the external environment and also be aware of what kind of limitations and what kind of resources you have in place in your company. What are your reserve levels? How much you can kind of afford to chase growth over profitability, so that you can kind of take right decisions at the right time. Because what we have realized in the last, this is what I've kind of gathered and through my experience is that when you think about that you can kind of play around with profitability for some time, but because the cash burn tap is in your hand, but then it's very important to understand that once you kind of decide to turn off the tap, still by when exactly you will actually start generating the cash or start start generating internal accruals. So that if you're having a good thorough knowledge about all of these things, I think you can play around with growth and profitability as per your comfort levels, and then you can actually, and to answer the question for Anshul, you'll have to communicate accordingly to the CEO so that the eventual objective of the company is kind of met.
Okay. Ankit Prasad has a question. What are the key behavioral and technical skills to look out for while setting up the finance team for a mid-sized tech startup?
So, I have kind of, I always feel that, I would look forward for people who are kind of reflecting an attitude to kind of continue with the organization for a period of at least 3 to 5 years.
Is that a
I
challenge you face while hiring for a startup?
Sorry.
Is that a challenge you face while hiring?
Not really, because I think people now there's a good transformation in India. The way people now look at startups is very different as compared to what it was being looked upon a decade back. But so now I don't think that's a challenge. But what I've witnessed and what I've seen is that many a times people struggle to kind of adopt to the culture the startup goes through, especially when people who have kind of joined the startup world are from a large corporate world. So because the two cultures are very different, right? So it's important to kind of figure out that attitude in the resource and then kind of take your decisions while building up a team.
Krishan Shah asks, for aspiring CFOs, do you have a specific book or training that you recommend?
I personally, as I mentioned, I always look forward to kind of learn things from resources, not even leaders, because that's where you kind of excel and you don't shy away from learning even of the smallest of the works, right? So there are several books, but the best way to kind of grow through this journey is to kind of experience every single layer and kind of learn from the best in the field.
Okay, so throw yourself at the deep end is your suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Ayush Agarwal asks, what should be the role of a CFO in managing or mitigating the interdepartmental understanding gaps? I love this question.
So we personally, what we do is, kind of, there should be a lot of, like I mentioned earlier as well, there should be a lot of clarity in your communication, and same thing you can expect from others when you are clear. So when you're putting your question to them, you can put it should be amply clear that, that the response is also kind of so simple that there will be no miscommunication there, and there will be no gaps in the communication line. So that's my view on this.
Have you ever played the interlocutor or some kind of a mediator between leaders of different departments because you have a specific understanding of the financial situation, which either of them might not have?
It's not a mediator role, but I do kind of play a role where I have to kind of emphasize on the implications of the tasks that they're kind of handling or the kind of act that they're going to do, because that's going to have a financial implication on the organization. So I have to kind of explain and kind of make them understand the overall implication that that particular event will have on the financials of the organizations.
So the CFO's role is also a little bit of an evangelizer of better understanding of the financial situation?
To an extent, yes. But again, I mean, it depends on situation to situation. So not always, but yeah, to an extent.
Okay. All right. So we have another question from Vishak, who's asking, what's your take on startups? Actually, we do have a lot more. What's your take on startups trying to go public now? Do you have an opinion?
So we've seen recently a lot of new companies going on the bourses and then kind of struggling to maintain the market cap because of the profitability issue to a great level. So and because of the inflated valuations, probably they would have kind of factored in file kind of getting listed. So I don't see a challenge. It's just that you have to be rightly valued, and you need to be kind of in having good unit economics in place. If that's in place, I think then it's all set to kind of go get yourself listed. So profitability with unit economics in place is something which holds it's a key point.
Okay, excellent. So Krishna Khadloya is asking, what are some of the key points that a CFO should follow to strengthen investor relations?
So I firmly believe, that investor relationships can be strengthened by being very clear, transparent, and ensuring that you're following the timeline. So once you've kind of committed to them to deliver few reports and whatever reports that you committed to them, it should go out from your desk, and it should be thoroughly vetted. There should be no reiteration of those reports, because then that kind of shatters the confidence of the investors, right? So if those things are, I think, followed, I think you will have a very good relationship with the investors, and that not only strengthens the relationship between the finance leader and these investors, but also for the overall relationship between the investor and the company.
Okay. Karthik has another question. While we talk about automation, it also comes with data security issues of your IT infra. If it's not robust enough, or setting up a robust enough infra itself is a tedious and complex process and still remain prone to theft. So what are your views on?
Actually, this is more of a question that a CTO will have to answer. But when it comes to the finance, I think it's important that you kind of have adequate measures in place, like the cybersecurity insurances, so that you kind of don't end up losing financially on any of these things. The other part of the question, I think the CTO, it's more up to the CTO. But as a finance leader, I think this is what I would kind of taken as a measure.
Okay, excellent. So let's find the next one. Anshul's asking, being a CFO, what are your key areas to review the organization's financials in detail?
It would differ company to company, business to business, and segment to segment. I mean, it can be like as basic as like monitoring the CAC when it comes to marketing spends, monitoring the logistics cost or fulfillment cost when it comes to fulfillment of a order for an online company, monitoring your COGS. So there are a lot of things, and it will kind of vary company to company, business to business, segment to segment.
What are yours? What are those things that you specifically
So
look
we
for?
look at, I mean, we start, I mean, to answer this in a simplified way, it would be unit economics that you need to kind of ensure that is kind of kept intact. Once you've addressed that, then you can kind of look into your gross margins that are kind of coming out from that as a derivation. Because if your unit economics are not intact, you will have a deviation on the gross margins that you have budgeted versus what you've actually realized. So if that's kind of so that's one of the key parameters that we kind of evaluate month on month basis, and then the expenses are always kind of checked with the budgets, so that your overall EBITDA levels do not alter from what you've kind of budgeted or kind of projected for the year.
Nice. Speaking of projection, Shailesh is asking how to face situations when your existing company is acquired by a totally another group of companies. In such cases, how to face new processes and challenges.
So that's an event which happens once in a lifetime, or maybe probably only for select companies, right? So it's a thing which I haven't experienced yet, but my if I have to suggest something, it will depend on what processes and what processes are being followed by the company which has acquired the smaller or the other company which is being acquired. We'll have to kind of, it depends on what processes. If they have a robust process, definitely you'll have to kind of move into that. But if those are not as strong as what it was there earlier, then that's a concerning thing. But otherwise, I don't see any issues in kind of migrating from your existing controls and processes to the newer ones.
Okay, all right. We'll take one last question. This is from Komil Shah. He's asking how to convey or explain financial discipline to non-financial team members.
I think I'd answer this. So you'll have to be very clear in your communications. You'll have to kind of explain the overall. To put it in simplified way, you'll have to kind of let them know that what is the overall financial implications, how much of cash outgo happens on a particular event, and how much of it can be saved, or how much of it can be kind of be pushed or deferred, and then be kind of paid later on. So those things, if it can be simplified, as a finance guy, what's embedded in the finance guy is those technical jargons like the accounting standards or the specific accounting principles. if you start discussing on those lines, I think it will be very difficult for someone to decipher. But when you kind of simplify things and then explain to them in terms of simple layman's language that this is the outgo and this is what you could have spent, could have saved, then I think life becomes much more simpler to kind of communicate.
All right. So that's all we have time for, folks. Chirag, thank you very, very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Ranjani. Thank you for having me here.
No problem. You can watch this video on YouTube and share it with your friends if you like in a few days. All our previous sessions are also available on YouTube for you to watch. We look forward to hearing from you. If you have any feedback, do write to us at Spendflo, and see you next time. Thank you.